Brought to you by Moonbeam Multimedia.
This is 16 to 1, a podcast about education, teaching, and learning.
Hi, hello.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing well. I'm rested.
So we're recording a few days before the pod comes out on the Sunday of the time change. This is important because we lost an hour, as we do every spring. And on top of that, Chelsea and I flew home late last night from Montana, which means that in the span of about 10 hours, we lost 3.
Yeah, we did.
So we lost from Mountain Time to Eastern Time and a spring forward.
We're not at peak operating.
And so it says it's 12:52. My body feels like it's barely 10 a.m.
Yeah.
So we've lost an eighth of our day just by sleeping and traveling.
Just by living. Yeah.
And I'd like a redo. I would like those 3 hours. They feel crucial now that I've lost them.
You are prepping to go on your DC adventure this week.
So we've been gone for a week. And then I'll be in school for 2 days. And then Wednesday morning, I have to be at school the day before this releases. Actually, the day that this releases, I'll be in DC surviving it with 100 plus teenagers. So we're going to be leaving the school like, I don't know, 6 a.m. or something. It's going to be an early day.
That's too early.
I'm about to get my steps in. Let me tell you. We're eating at the Hard Rock. I'm about to eat the whole menu.
Wow.
Have you ever been to the Hard Rock in DC?
I don't think I have, no.
That isn't where you went on your middle school trip?
No, we went to some Crystal City food cafe place thing.
You didn't have like a sit-down dinner at like a Buca? Did you do Buca? That's a very popular middle school trip destination.
I don't know what that is, so...
Buca de Beppo?
No.
We have a Buca in Columbus.
I've never been. But
really?
I genuinely don't remember. It's possible that it was Hard Rock Cafe, but I don't remember it.
It's on the corner near the National Portrait Gallery, and it's not far from Ford's Theater.
Yeah, I know where it is, but I don't remember having eaten there.
I think it's across from that Shake Shack we went to, maybe.
Now that you're talking about it, though, I am remembering some weird experience at a Hard Rock Cafe.
I'm thinking about Madame Tussauds. I think it's in that area, too.
I really don't know.
I'll let you know in 2 weeks.
Yeah, let us know. Let us know how
So, what about you? What do you have planned with your grand week back where you're not escorting 100 and
I'm not really sure what I'm going to do with myself. Compared to that, I'm going to get caught up on work. But compared to that, I'm going to have a rather uneventful week, I think.
I'll have the events for both of us.
Yeah.
I'm tired thinking about it.
Yeah.
I think if we had lost 3 hours in a day, I would probably be feeling much more positive.
Well, the DC trip is always it's a whirlwind because you just kind of, first of all, there's so many teenagers crammed into buses, but also it's so much to try to see all at one time, and you're just going. I'm
gonna take a drink of coffee
because you need it.
I'm tired
because you need it from just discussing the DC trip makes you. Requires your body to have caffeine.
You know how people carb load?
Yeah.
I'm caffeine loading.
I don't think it works that way.
Oh.
I don't think it works
that
way.
My heart's
like, heart go brr.
I haven't had cold brew in a week. Not since it's been over a week, actually.
Your body's going to be like, what are you doing?
I completely quit caffeine while we were out. I don't mess with
like
that.
The cold brew.
So I had my first pop yesterday on our flight home. Yeah.
You also had caffeine. So you had like a caffeine and altitude headache for a week, basically.
Yeah, my head doesn't hurt at all today. Go figure. Also, I have one of the new Apple Watches that I got for Christmas, and it has the pulse ox on it.
Yeah.
And so I got an alert like Wednesday or Thursday of our week in Montana, and it was like, your oxygen levels are lower than they ever have been.
Sis, what are you doing?
And it was like, it had like an asterisk. It was like reading taken at high altitude. But it was like significantly lower, like 5 and 6% lower.
Oh, it makes a difference. Yeah.
It just makes you like more tired. You want to drink water. You can't go
upstairs. I can't go upstairs without getting out of breath out there.
No, I know. I carried up the luggage and I was like...
Yeah, I almost collapsed after I carried my suitcase up a flight of stairs. Yep.
So we spent the week in Big Sky, Montana. It was just wonderful. It was great. It was one of the most beautiful places.
Tons of snow.
On Earth. Feet.
We had a blizzard.
Absolute feet of snow.
Yeah.
Whiteout conditions. The whole thing. We really had a whole lived experience.
You really got the winteriest of Montana winter. experience.
It was.
This time around.
We saw, well, let's be real. All we saw were elk.
We saw a lot of elk.
A lot of elk and a couple Clydesdales.
Yes.
Nothing else was out, though. Last year we got to see a couple of...
We saw fox footprints on the deck.
Yeah, we saw fox's footprints. Last year we saw a couple of moose, and we didn't get to this year. Mm-hmm. I think they were like, I'm going to stay home. Yeah. The moose, there's no way. They're not working that hard. They're not coming out in like 50-mile-per-hour winds.
No, it was blustery.
It was great food, great recharge.
Yes, and while
much needed.
Yes, and while we were out there, we were actually on the clock for 16 to 1. We recorded a very special podcast episode that we do want to tell you about. Just a little bit of upcoming news. In 2 weeks from now, this episode will release. We are having a discussion on building equitable learning environments with guest Dr. Giselle C. Shorter. Dr. Shorter is the Director of National Education Strategy at the Rakes Foundation. That's where she leads the K-12 school and system redesign portfolio, focused on a commitment to grow the foundation's impact and to advance justice and equity in the redesign of our national public education system by leveraging the science of learning and development. We had a great conversation with Dr. Shorter. We're very much looking forward to sharing that with you. So again, keep an eye out for that. That's coming in 2 weeks. We usually aren't operating quite this far out. We aren't quite this far advanced with our upcoming show schedule. So we've got that on deck episode for you. So like I said, check back in 2 weeks from now. We will be releasing that. And
episode 81 will be hers, Dr. Shorter's.
No.
So.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
It says it in the notes.
You're right. I lost count. Remember when I didn't remember how many years we'd been doing this podcast? I mean, don't ask me. Okay, so anyway, we're really looking forward to it. It was a really interesting conversation.
It was a very cool opportunity to talk with Dr. Shorter, and we just had so much fun. I could have talked to her forever.
Yeah.
I think maybe I've convinced her to come join our trivia team in the summer.
Yes, we're going to make her the new star of our trivia team.
We're going to hold Dr. Shorter to it and have her come and visit Ohio some nice summer day when we can go out to the lake and enjoy a trivia session with her. But she was really wonderful, and I'm excited to share it. It was an interesting conversation.
Yeah, so. I was kind of blown away. I
feel very lucky that she was willing to, talk to us for that long.
Yeah, you're going to be able to tell, but I'm just kind of like awestruck most of the time. I'm just sort of like, oh, okay, I have another question.
I feel like at the end of everything she said, I was like, wow.
I just like,
but I meant it.
Loved to hear from her and just hear about what she's working on, and I was very inspired by her work. And anyway, so that's very cool. That's cool. We're looking forward to it.
But that isn't this episode.
Not this episode. This episode, we're disappointing you.
Sorry, it's just
simply the two of us.
And actually, what we're talking about, this is even funnier. We're talking about middle school this week.
We sure are.
Which is a bit of a hot topic, even between the two of us when we discuss it. So we're going to be talking about the challenges that middle school students face, like social, academic, their mental health concerns. And then also a little bit of the developmental psychology that motivates us to take a closer look at these very unique needs of people in this age group. And gosh, this is going to be a fun one because really quickly, I'm going to jump ahead like 2 points. I loved middle school, and Chelsea did not.
Yeah, no, not so much.
And so
middle school is not my jam.
No,
and we have some notes that might indicate like why that is, just developmental psychology wise. But
so just for kind of setting the record straight of what we're talking about, because we've all experienced this stage of our lives. It's just a matter of what we called it. So it can be called junior high or an intermediate school, but we're basically talking about students age 11 to 14, maybe even into like 15 years old. So that's the range. So wherever your school, whatever your school defined it as or named it, this is that. So
as with most things in the United States education system, there is no standard way to approach it. So it does have different names in different contexts.
Maybe you went to a K-8 school.
Yeah. So
who knows?
That's actually the main, the kind of part of the thing we're going to talk about here is that there's a sort of difference of approach between a K through 8 school and then a totally separate middle or intermediate or junior high or whatever it is we're calling it, middle school. It was middle school for me, so I'm most comfortable calling it that too. Yep. And it was I guess it was 6th through 8th grade.
That's what mine was as well.
Yeah,
I did like K through 4, and then we had an intermediate school. Yeah, I loved middle school.
Tell me why you loved middle school. I don't know if I can tell you why I did not love middle school. I would love to hear why you did like it though.
Well, I partially loved it because my dad taught 8th grade. my dad taught at the time when I was in middle school. I can't remember when he came up to middle school with me. I feel like I followed him after a while. I think I had elementary without him. He was at the intermediate school with me. And then I think I had 6th grade without him. And then he came up to the middle school with me.
So he's just following you.
It felt like it. But he was an 8th grade social studies teacher. So I think I loved middle school because my dad was there. That was a big factor. But I think I loved it because I knew all my teachers like really well because they were like my dad's coworkers and friends.
Interesting.
So I felt very connected to that staff. Because I knew them.
You had a sense of belonging within that community.
Yeah, I did. Because,
automatically.
Yeah. And that was like 7th and 8th grade is when you started school sports. And we were really good at volleyball, which was great. We were not so good at basketball, of course, which was my favorite sport. We weren't bad, but we weren't great. I don't know. I think I had teachers I connected with. I loved having my dad there with me. And I got to take classes with my friends. And I think that was like really important for me. That was like when I really got into music, like our band and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So those were kind of just like, I think big years, like kind of prepping for it. I just loved 7th and 8th grade. I was so sad to leave middle school.
So here's what happened from my perspective and why I didn't like it. And it sounds like all of the things that made it fun for you are some of the things that made it not so fun for me because you're like talking about taking classes with your friends and stuff. I completely lost my friend group from elementary school when I moved to middle school. Like I couldn't describe to you why this happened, but just like the fact that you go from having well, at least I did. I went from having a single teacher that teaches across all subjects in 4th grade to like 5 or 6 teachers or something like that each teach, maybe not quite that many, but a couple of different teachers who each teach a subject or two. That can kind of break up your day in an interesting way. You have a less consistent relationship with your classroom teacher. And then on top of that, so you also split up friend groups just because of scheduling in that context. But then on top of that, I just kind of completely lost my friend group when we got to middle school because in elementary school, I had friendships based on like being like the little smart dweeb kid. And then in middle school, it very much became like, are you pretty and can you play sports well? And I did not check either of those boxes. In particular, I played sports and I was like, okay, it's softball, but I didn't play that in school. Yeah. And then so I started trying to play volleyball in middle school, which thrust me into this social circle with a bunch of girls that I did not really particularly get along with. They were not interested in the same sorts of things that I was. We didn't hang out after school. These weren't my friends and peers. And so I was super, super lonely.
Yeah.
Now, I will say that middle school is definitely also the time when I started to find a friend group that became kind of like my true and lasting friend group that has lasted into adulthood. Some of them. So like, that's the time when I redefined myself, like you were saying, in terms of the music program. I got really into music and arts and stuff like that in middle school. All my friends were like in orchestra and choir and stuff like that. And so, but I had to rediscover friends. So the social landscape of middle school was really difficult for me to manage. And I found it very stressful and distracting somewhat.
Yeah, I just loved it. I feel so lucky to have, quote unquote, such an easy time during what was such a hard time for a lot. But I definitely didn't realize how hard it was for others because, I think even if we asked like some of my friends, like, we got to go to one of the weddings of one of my friends from middle school a couple years ago, and like my whole group got back together. There was like 5 of us that had kind of grown up together and our parents were friends and the whole thing. And so
yeah, see, that would never happen for me. I would never come back to a reunion of my middle school friends. It just wouldn't be possible.
Mean like, it was her wedding, so it was just like, but it was cool that the 5 of us all got to be there together because we don't get very many options. So now it's like, if one of us gets married, that's where we get to see each other, which feels, or like, something like that. So I feel like that's kind of like where I made like that core group that kind of got me through high school, but they weren't the same friends I had forever.
I'm happy for you. I'm happy for you that you found that, because I can say from the other side of not having had a kind of like core group of friends like that in middle school that it's really not fun to navigate.
Yeah. I mean, had we not all played volleyball and 4 of us played volleyball and then all 5 of us played basketball. I think if we hadn't done that probably would have changed it. But
as you can see, a lot of this focuses on the sort of socio-behavioral impact of middle school. So like our experiences of middle school are so drastically different. I wouldn't even say it's because, middle school was not particularly challenging academically for me, but it was challenging for all of these other ancillary reasons that are so important to the educational landscape.
I mean, parts of it were academically challenging.
Yeah, I didn't mean like that. I didn't mean I had no challenge. I just meant I wasn't so depressed by middle school because I was struggling with grades or something. I was depressed with middle school because of my friends.
Sense. Yeah, that makes sense. I think that probably makes a world of difference.
I was still like an uptight type A perfectionist sort about like, you know, I would still get very stressed about grades, but
I wasn't.
But that's just how I am.
I was not type A about grades. My parents were just, I didn't do poorly ever, but it was not the highest of priorities to me. I mean, I'm the kid that when I found out why we were taking the gifted test, I just blew it off because I didn't want to take the test.
Oh, fun.
And my dad was like, because they like went and talked to him because it was in the intermediate school where he was. I think I was in 5th grade when I took that test for like the middle school portion of gifted.
Yeah.
And I think they must have told us what the test was for, and I just blew it off because I didn't want to do it.
They told me what the test was for some reason, and I got so stressed.
Oh. I have like a
stress memory of being tested for this. Well, it's like complicated, but I have a stress memory of being of having to take that test and kind of vaguely knowing what it was for, but not knowing like what I was being asked to do exactly. And I was like in a room by myself with this woman that I had never met before.
Oh, we took them like in a class together.
Yeah, no, mine was scheduled like after the fact because but anyway,
you were so smart.
No, but
yeah, no, my dad has this great story of me like figuring out what it was for. And just absolutely blowing it off. And because the teacher who tested me went to my dad and was like, because, you know, I did well in school. I wasn't like brilliant, but I like could compete. And they went to him and he was like, what? And he asked me and I was like, I didn't care. I basically was just like, I don't care to do like I didn't want to do it. I knew I didn't want to do it. And so the teacher went to my dad and was like,
it's such a weird thing though. Okay, so you and I both having had this experience of so we're talking about testing to get into a talented and gifted pull-out class, right?
Tag,
yeah. Well, mine was called PACE, and I actually talk about PACE in our next episode with Dr. Shorter. I talk about this class that like saved my life in middle school because it truly did at the time, and we could have an entire episode about the merit. We even talked about this with our special education episode. We briefly mentioned pull-out classes for various special education needs, and anyway, we did used to have a pull-out gifted class at the middle school, and I really needed that stimulation at the time. Like that's where I found some friends. Yeah, that I found friends in that class again, like fellow weirdos who couldn't have social time like me. It kind of saved my life, and through middle school, and helped me navigate not having much of a social mesh. So again, the social impact being very important, but academically it was also very challenging for me too, and I needed that. But anyway, there's so many of these pressures, and like, yeah, when you know what you're being evaluated for in those tests, it's so awkward. It's so awkward that I don't know, just the whole system of how we do that and how we identify kids.
It's hard.
It's stigmatizing and weird, and you're going through changes and all of it. And anyway, tough time.
Yeah, I just love that 5th grade me was like, nah. I'm
gonna pass. I'm not interested.
Oh my gosh, my dad's told that story a few times, and I've just been like, oh man. And it's not because I don't think I didn't get a fine education. Like I was fine.
You were certainly just cheeky.
I was always a student who could have worked harder, but I knew exactly what to do to get by. And as I got older and older and took more challenging classes, then that required more or less of me, obviously. But my parents were always just so understanding. Like, C's were not the end of the world for us. Like, they just wanted me to work hard and try my best. And that was just how I ruled out what I did and didn't like. And so I think that was a really healthy way to learn.
That's super
because
interesting.
It always supported me to know that I'm not going to be the best, or I'm not going to get an A. And that was okay. Yeah. And so
you're saying that your grades kind of told you about yourself what you did and didn't like. Like, your grades were indicators of how much you cared about the subject that you were learning. Yeah.
And it wasn't because, I worked my butt off in some math classes that I got like low B's and C's in. And it wasn't because I didn't try. I did. Could I have done more? Of course I could have. I could have always done more. But it wasn't the end of the world as long as I could show to my parents, like, I did my best. I'm working as hard as I can. But my parents also really valued me being in other activities. Like, they knew how important sports were. They knew how important in high school band and drama were. Like, they were always so, like, just, you know what I mean? Like, accommodating of me. Like, there was no, like, bad blood. There was no, like, insane pressure, I guess. Like, they just, like, were fine with the student that I was. And I probably was harder on myself than they ever were. And I think that's good. Like, I feel thankful that I had that kind of parenting, especially in middle school, when it could have already been so much harder because of everything else you're going through. And in the high school, too, because I don't think high school is easy for people by any means, just because of what we're about to talk about being exacerbated even more as you grow older and older. But yeah, I feel like...
I also had in middle school, what made it somewhat difficult for me is I had, like, this best frenemy thing. This girl who was, like, kind of in a lot of the same activities as me. We played the same instruments and orchestra, and like we were on softball teams together, and like we sort of were like our parents pushed us to socialize together. Not that we needed it, but like we wanted to hang out, but also we kind of we butted heads a lot because of reasons.
So you had
like
whatever. A continuing.
So there's like this ongoing constant drama with my best friend. Like like my best friend who doesn't like me sometimes is what it felt like to me at the time. And just like, why is this girl being mean to me? I don't understand. I'm not cool enough for her. I don't like, my parents don't have the same politics as her parents, and that's apparently a problem. And I didn't even know that was a problem that people cared about until then. You know,
interesting.
It's the time when you start to become aware of those kinds of reasons why adults don't get along. That was all entering my life at the same time. So it was just like it was a very fraught time. But I do want to talk about some of these developmental psychology factors, because we are sort of we're getting into them anyway, so we might as well
dive in.
Yeah.
One more thing before we jump into this that I wanted to mention, kind of piggybacking on what you said about your family's relationships with peers, families, and things like that. Middle school is also about the time that we started going on vacation with a really large group of teachers and their families from where my dad worked, which was also where I went to school. My one friend, Megan, she lives in Georgia now, and we only get to see her like maybe once a year, but her parents and my parents were really close. And so Megan and I still talk every day to this day. So I feel like...
created more social continuity.
Yeah, it did.
Too.
And it actually helped in some ways that our parents were friends, was because it kind of bound us even tighter in a good way. I mean, Megan and I now don't talk to each other because we have to by any means, but that was kind of a cool thing to grow up in a big, and it was just so happened that all the families that went on this trip together all had daughters. And so it was just kind of a cool experience to grow up with these young women, 3 and 4 years older than me at times. And it kind of helped me make deeper connections even in high school, because they were seniors when I was a freshman and things like that.
Well, it's funny that you mentioned daughters, because I think that, and I'm sorry that I keep coming back to like my own sad sack experience in middle school, but struggling to find women, like girls, peers, girl peer friend group were really hard for me.
Yeah.
I always was like, found myself more at ease among boys my age.
Yeah.
And again, this was like, so again, with the best friend of me thing, it was just like, I didn't know how to participate in the girly culture of girliness. And like, I didn't know how to have crushes on boys, because they never like the ones I liked never liked me back. And I felt out of place. And I didn't really have female peers to talk about this stuff, to discuss this with. So it was just, some of it was just like coming into gender norms and stereotypes too, in a way that I did not know how to navigate. Yeah. I'm like, I don't know how to be attractive to boys, and also I don't even know if I want to be attractive to boys. Like, why do I have to think about this? It's very stressful.
I feel like that was not even on our minds in middle school. I mean, I had friends who had boyfriends, but it was just like,
oh man, there were so many hormones floating around in our middle school. I think we just had such everybody different experiences. It was all about like holding hands. I mean, that's what is meant by dating in middle school.
Oh, that's a big deal.
But like holding hands.
Yeah, no, I'm with
no,
you.
But like which boy you have a crush on is a big deal. And the other thing is, okay, so I had a crush on this kid in middle school, and literally the entire school knew that I had a crush, because I told one of my friends from elementary school, this girl that I was friends with in elementary school. She told the entire school. She just told everyone. Like she made it a joke. She actually guessed my email password and sent emails to this kid from my email account on behalf of me, pretending like I was confessing my love for this kid. So I felt very betrayed by my friends, clearly. There was a lot of social backstabbing.
Until like, I think 8th grade.
Well,
so I guess
I mean, my dad worked in technology.
Had you not had an email, maybe
I had an email account way before many of my friends did,
Yeah,
because my dad was in technology.
Does your first email account still exist?
Yes.
Is that the one you still use?
I don't hardly ever use it. I get spam email.
Tell me what it was, but we won't put it on the pod.
No. Anyway,
so it seems like, gosh, we really did have such polar opposite.
Yeah.
Like, okay.
Yeah,
so here are some of the things.
Well, the thing is that the problem here is that you're likable and I'm not. So you would have an easier time.
This is awkward. Weird way to find out the podcast is ending because Chelsea's not likable.
I am not.
So
yes, let's
to
get
build
back
upon
into
what we were dealing with.
Yeah.
Here are some of the things, according to the CDC, that happen to students in this range, right? So like 11 to 15, let's call it. So there are emotional and social changes, and there are thinking and learning changes. So here are the biggest emotional and social changes that are occurring.
The ones that gave me all the struggles.
We already talked about all of these things. Okay. So there's concerns about body image, looks, and clothes.
Yeah.
There's the focus on themselves. So going back and forth between high expectations and lack of confidence.
Yeah.
They can experience more moodiness.
Yes. Can confirm that is true.
Show more interest in and influenced by their peer groups. Mm-hmm. They can express less affection towards parents. Sometimes that might seem rude or short-tempered.
Probably so, yep. Mm-hmm.
I really don't think this was my experience at all. Okay. They feel stressed from more challenging schoolwork. Wow, I literally just said I looked it in the eyes and said no. Okay.
Yeah,
good.
you're like, no, I don't feel that stressed. Thank you.
They can develop eating problems. And then they can also start to feel sadness or depression. And that can lead to poor grades at school, alcohol and drug use, unsafe sex, depending on what age they get that talk in school. And then the thinking and learning changes. They can have more ability for complex thought.
If you say so.
Yeah, they can be better able to express their feelings through talking, and they can develop a stronger sense of what's right and wrong. They can. It doesn't mean they will.
A lot of this strikes me as being hormonal. But yeah, I mean, so I think that first category of changes that happen during this 11 to 14 or 15 age range, those are the ones that I struggled with a lot because, I mean, body image, like I was telling you, I didn't think of myself as being particularly attractive. And I also didn't understand why and how people started to care about that. Like, I'm just still me, but now everybody is like worried about who's cute and who's not, and I don't really want to play that game.
That was so not on my radar. Like, I think I cared about.
I mean, a lot of this just came from the group of girls that I was trying to fit into. Because again, I didn't have a peer group of girl friends, and the ones that the people I was socializing with, they were the sporty, athletic, popular girls, and I was never going to fit in among their ranks, and I was trying to desperately. Yeah. And so I didn't know how to dress. I didn't know how to carry myself. I didn't know how to get invited to social functions that I wanted to be invited. It was hard. A lot of angst.
Yeah, I'd say so.
Yeah.
That's too bad.
Yeah.
Wish you could have a redo.
Me too. My experience is not singular. I think that there are a lot of people who question this shift from elementary school to middle school. And so there's actually, I found a article from the Harvard Graduate School of Education. The article is titled, "Do Middle Schools Make Sense?" And it was looking back at this history. So like it was pointing out that in the early 20th century, U.S. schools were mainly K through 8 models. And again, a lot of schools still do have K through 8 models, or now are returning to them for various reasons. But by the mid-century, there's this response to growing enrollment in a lot of schools. We need to start splitting up schools just to be able to handle capacity. So a lot of places create junior highs, which they usually start like maybe grades 7 through 8 or 9 or something like that. But then this article says that as cited on the National Center for Education Statistics website, school districts began moving away from the junior high model in the 1960s and toward the creation of middle schools starting in grades 5 or 6. So a little bit younger, they get broken off. These schools either replaced junior highs or were created where there were still K through 8 schools. In 70 and 71, there were 2,100 middle schools. By the 1998-99 school year, there were 11,200, an increase of more than 430%. During the same period, the number of junior high schools declined by nearly 54%. So interesting kind of timeline there. They're conflicting reports on the effectiveness of separate elementary and middle school versus an integrated K through 8 configuration. And you found this one, you found a collection of research from the American Psychological Association. You want to walk us through that a little bit?
Yeah, everything's included in the show notes as always. Yep. But this article was titled Middle School Malaise, and it was from the APA, as Chelsea said. And so this article actually included information from the University of Michigan and a group of researchers there that studied the transition from elementary to middle school. And so this is just some of their findings. On average, children's grades dropped dramatically during the first year of middle school compared to their grades in elementary school. Mm-hmm. Was that your experience?
No, but I was terrified of getting anything other than an A. So my entire life revolved around my report card.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
After moving to junior high school, children become less interested in school and less self-assured about their abilities.
That was not true for me.
That wasn't my experience either.
Although I will say it was true of a lot of my peers. A lot of my peers it wasn't about school so much as it was school as an excuse for a social scene.
Yeah.
I would say that's true.
Compared to elementary schools, middle schools were more controlling, less cognitively challenging, and focused more on competition and comparing students' ability. I didn't have that experience either.
I did. I think, it's hard.
You felt more controlled in middle school?
Yes.
Did you really?
Yes. And because everything is decided for you. No, everything is decided for you. In elementary school, I have distinct memories of an extraordinary degree of freedom in the classroom. And this might have just been because I benefited from a couple of good teachers in elementary school, but the sort of creative freedom of imaginative play in elementary school and how there's more unstructured time and stuff like that.
Yeah, I suppose that's true.
So even think about going from having recess to not having recess, which is what happened.
Oh, see, we could still go play at lunch.
I guess maybe, I don't know. Maybe
we could go play basketball and Foursquare at lunch and stuff like that. Whatever time we had left over at lunch, we could go outside or go in the gym and play.
Yeah, I don't remember ever leaving the cinder block walls of the middle school once I got to the middle school during the day. Okay. Now that might have just been my schedule, but I think in general, the prescribing of what the structure of the day looks like. Okay. And then also I think that the focus on developing habits, healthy study habits and stuff, it gave, while it gives you a lot of tools in your toolbox for discipline and for doing well academically, it also imposes a lot more structure and on students and and provokes a lot less choice in the matter of one's education. Yeah. So, yeah.
Okay, and then this is a quote from the article. Okay, it says, psychologists have discovered a developmental mismatch between the environment and the philosophy of middle schools and the children they attempt to teach. At a time when children's cognitive abilities are increasing, middle school offers them fewer opportunities for decision-making and lower levels of cognitive involvement, but a more complex social environment. At the same time, numerous teachers have replaced a single classroom teacher, and students often face larger classes and new groups of peers.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I went through a lot of these things in 5th grade, because 5th grade is when our 2 elementaries combined. So I'd already gone through a lot of this. So I think that may be why some of this doesn't really appeal to me in the same way, is because we'd already done our great combination. Okay.
I guess I would that's middle school, though. Doing the combination year, that falls within.
Yeah, 5th grade in this case, yeah. I guess, I don't know why it felt so different for me. But anyways, so which students do the best, according to this APA article? They said that according to the research, children who believe that intelligence can change over time made the best adjustment to secondary school. And this is true even if these children had low self-confidence. Children
who believe that intelligence can change over time. Okay, that's a kind of metacognitive assessment. How does a middle schooler, I'm asking because I didn't. I was going to say, how does a middle schooler have the presence of mind to be yes, intelligence can change over time. I need not be limited by my current state of, how do you have the self-confidence as a middle schooler to think that?
I think if I was to understand this as a middle schooler, I can remember conversations with my parents where, I really didn't like what I was learning. I can remember in science class one year not really enjoying what I was learning. And I remember my parents being like, well, maybe that's just the teacher, or maybe it's just this, or maybe you're just not interested in this type of science. You'll be interested in other types of science eventually. And I was like, when I got to high school, I really enjoyed my biology class and I had a wonderful teacher. And so that's kind of how I understand that, I guess. But I don't know if I would have understood it in that way as a child or in middle school. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And that was the case in like history class and things like that too. Like I remember being really bored with like certain parts of history. Go figure. And my dad being like, oh yeah, but you'll get into this type of American history next year and you're really going to like that. And I did. Mm-hmm. I guess is that the same kind of thing?
I think that this is talking about which it sounds like you have, like an awareness that what you are experiencing right now, if you're bumping up against the limits of your own academic involvement or achievement or something, you have a belief in yourself that it's kind of temporary and you can evolve past it.
I certainly did.
Rather than just like, I'm smart or I'm not. So that middle school can be a time when students start to feel, well, I just don't get it because I'm not smart and I'm never going to get it. Yeah. So that takes away a feeling of agency from one's own education. Sense. When you feel like, well, I just don't get it and I never will, obviously you're going to be kind of disconnected from your own that makes growth sense. And learning because you think that it's an inherent ability that you have that can't be changed.
I never thought that way. You're right. Yeah. That's interesting. Okay, and the other thing that they said from the article about which students do best was that it was actually the high confidence kids who believed that their intelligence was fixed who had the most trouble making the transition. These kids apparently believed that they should be able to do well because they were smart and that extra effort in order to learn a new skill was not necessary. When effortless learning did not take place, these students lost confidence, motivation, and interest. Yeah. I still see this as true in high school.
I was going to say and I would be so curious to find research on this, but this totally happened to me, but not until high school. Yeah. So the shift from elementary school to middle school, this academic impact didn't happen to me then, but it did happen to me at some point in high school, like halfway through high school, where it suddenly went from like, my academic workload was not challenging for me in many cases to it suddenly required effort, and I was like, oh no, my entire life and psyche is falling apart because I no longer can effortlessly complete things that people expected me to be able to. It felt like people expected me to be able to effortlessly complete. So there's a lot of pressure and anxiety. I was just a little ball of nerves.
You are
without
a little
friends.
Ball of nerves.
A little ball of nerves.
You were
without
still
friends.
A ball of nerves.
Yeah, but now I have friends
and a bigger ball.
Bigger ball of nerves.
Sounds like you're a hamster.
Plus friends. Okay. So then
I really
yeah.
We are such different people. I'm so interested in these conversations because like to know us personally, I think everyone's like check. That's key.
Yeah, this would surprise no one to hear about these things.
But I really just I don't know, man. My parents were just like, did you try? Could you try harder? Okay. That was it.
Yeah.
I think that's okay. I think I'm okay.
I mean, my parents were very encouraging.
I didn't mean that in a way that your parents weren't.
No, sorry. I did want to say though that I think that
Did you have a higher expectation of yourself than your parents did?
Yes. But yes, and also though no, I mean, they had pretty high expectations of me. It wasn't higher. It's just that I internalized a lot of my struggles and did not know how to ask for help ever. Gotcha. So even when I was struggling, I had never been given, and this isn't like, I'm not faulting anyone for this because it's very difficult to develop, but I'd never been given the lexicon to ask for help. Yeah. So when I did need help with something in the social or academic context of school, I just kind of was like, well, I've always been able to figure it out on my own. Why can't I do that now?
Oh, okay.
And
so you kind of put it back on yourself.
Yeah, so I'm saying that like a lot of these struggles were me putting pressure on myself because of not knowing how to ask for help.
I really think having my dad in the building with me in middle school must have been what just blew open all the doors on this all the time.
Yeah, I'm sure that would change it pretty
because I just like, yeah, that's so interesting. And I think this isn't about middle school directly, but I think this is probably like when you were talking about your parents having high expectations. And I think that part of what that article was suggesting and what we've talked about previously is middle school is also when you and I were growing up, we had like a state standardized test in middle school. And like today our kids do take, I think 1 or 2 state tests still. But it's kind of like one of the first times that there's like this very competitive edge.
High stakes testing.
Yeah. And I think we took it also in 4th grade.
Yeah, well, there's a 4th grade
test when we were younger.
4th grade test, whatever that was, yeah.
I'm wondering that's where I wonder about the data. What does the introduction of these tests do to us? And
well, that was the first time when people were like, "What did you get? No, what did you get?"
See, it was like this. Any of that? Oh my gosh!
Oh gosh, we so did.
We were not that. Okay, so here's the thing: the people that were like the smartest in my class, I didn't want to know their test scores because I knew mine wasn't near theirs. And the kids that were smart in my class were true, like they were very smart and they were very kind people. And I actually really liked a lot of our like top 5. Now that I'm thinking back about who they are, but I wasn't there. And I think that might have actually been, like, I was, like, I don't know, maybe top 15% of my class. Like, I was not banging down barn doors to, like, get somewhere with my intelligence, which probably helped me. Because I think that's why my parents were just like, did you try?
Yeah, well, that's the other part of, like,
you
why...
were in a much more competitive state.
No, it's not even competitive. It's just that I had defined my entire existence around my own self-perception of my intelligence. So like,
did you do that in elementary school?
Yes, that's what I'm saying.
Really?
Like, I had friends
that young is
I
when...
had friends in elementary school because I was smart, and people thought that in elementary school, people thought that being smart was the same thing as being cool. In middle school, being smart is not being cool. Okay. So I had a good friend group in elementary school, and they were all like, "Chelsea's really smart. We're going to be friends with her." And I was like, "Cool. I like being smart, and I like learning. Be friends with me." I didn't have to like do any work. Yeah,
they just came to you because
I didn't have to do work to earn friendships because people just liked being around who they perceived to be smart in elementary school.
Oh, okay.
I'm way oversimplifying the social landscape, but that's just my own perception of how it felt. I will say that is how I felt the social landscape worked at the time.
That's so interesting. Gosh, this is like a whole vent session.
We're uncovering some deep traumas on this podcast.
We are healing our inner children.
Yeah. Right now. Again, like that's just how I look back on my own experience and describe it. Whether or not that was really what was going on, everybody's, each student is going through their own world of navigating this stuff. So it's not like people were out to get me and I didn't have friends or something like that. I'm just saying that was my experience.
That was your take home.
That's how it felt.
Gotcha.
That's what I felt like. Yep.
All right.
Yeah. So anyway.
Wow.
So that was an article that you found that was suggesting that there's this big break that happens between elementary and middle schools, and that break comes with it. What comes with that break are academic setbacks and social setbacks and things that might things that might prompt us to reconsider whether we should break off middle schools into their own separate entities or keep things in like a K through 8 integrated configuration. Yeah. However, there's this other study. It's a 2018 study that I found while we were researching this too. It was published in the Journal of Urban Economics called "How Does Grade Configuration Impact Student Achievement in Elementary and Middle School Grades?" And this study involves, now this is just like one school district, so keep this in mind. It's kind of competing evidence, but it is just within one school district, so, a small sample size here. But it involves a school district that closed and rezoned several schools with new boundaries. And this allowed researchers from NYU, the University of Kentucky, and the RAND Corporation to compare students on both sides of these new boundaries. So on one side, we get students assigned to separate K through 5 elementary schools and then 6 through 8 middle schools. And on the other side, we have students assigned to a K through 8 school. So interesting research opportunity here. Similar to previous research, the study found there's a dip in math scores when you jump from elementary school to middle school. When you go to the separate middle school the first year, there's a dip in math scores. However, students in grades 3 through 5 performed better in separate elementary schools, offsetting the lower 6 through 8 grade scores. By 8th grade, attending a K through 8 school had no effect in math. And then in reading, students in separate middle schools made larger gains in 7th and 8th grade and ended middle school with higher scores than their peers in K through 8 schools.
That's so weird.
Isn't it?
That doesn't make any sense.
So it said the adverse effects for elementary students in K through 8 schools, combined with the lack of long-term adverse effects for students attending separate middle schools, does not provide support for a K through 8 configuration, the report concludes. In fact, our results provide some evidence against K through 8 schools as a policy. So,
jeez.
Again, that's a somewhat recent study. This is like a pre-COVID. A lot of this stuff, I'm so curious to know now how COVID because COVID continues to impact these conversations. I'm curious to know now what the numbers might look like, but yeah, at least some conflicting reporting they're suggesting.
That is so fascinating.
Yeah.
I wonder. Gosh, I'm just trying to work my head around that reading information because that's not what I was expecting based on the math.
Yeah, I would love to see some studies on this just to be able to back up some of these numbers because
I agree.
I mean, to me, it's even interesting that it suggests that there's a difference between subjects on how students should be grouped by age or whatever it is. Different rates of learning even within different disciplines.
I'm shocked, actually. I really am. I was not expecting
Didn't
that.
expect that?
No.
So I found this article from the New York State School Boards Association that was discussing this separate middle schools question, and they pointed out some of these conflicting research findings, and they were trying to figure out why we might be in this state of conflict about these results. And then this article was saying that one possibility is that grade configuration isn't really what's important here, which could very well be. Tom Phillips, the executive director of the New York State Middle School Association, says students in 6th, 7th, and 8th grade do better when their schools fully implement the most promising practices for middle grades, regardless of the grade configuration of their school. Seems kind of obvious, but he says
thank you.
he says that the key is fidelity in implementing an effective model, adding that a teaming approach seems to work best. So this groups students and teachers together in teams, and students in each of the grades 6 through 8 all have the same group of teachers in core subjects of English, math, social studies, and science, and teachers have time together to plan lessons and discuss student strengths and weaknesses. So this makes a lot of sense to me in that it's really not about where you arbitrarily split students off, but it's more about the social, emotional environment in which this learning is taking place, making sure there's like kind of continuity and familiarity and shared practices, and students have a firm understanding of the expectations that teachers have of them, stuff like that. So anyway, this article was saying that the teaming approach creates consistency and belonging, very important to students in middle school. And it allows students to be grouped and regrouped based on need, too. So anyway, like I said, the idea here is maybe that the age configuration doesn't matter so much as the social, emotional, and academic infrastructure being intentional within a school landscape and teachers taking the time to collaboratively identify needs within certain groups of students and stuff like that. So, yeah.
Yeah, I'm just sitting here thinking about, I've seen in Ohio K-8 schools, K-12 schools with wings and all kinds of things. So it's just really interesting. The different ways that schools are broken up. I mean, just kind of diving in more precisely into this information, because there are schools in Ohio that are whole K-12 buildings and then they're separated by wings and things like that. So
I gotcha. Yeah.
I'm just wondering, I remember what it was like to change schools in a new grade, right? Like if you were jumping from elementary to intermediate, and those were always like more nerve-wracking years.
Yeah,
and
I still have
that,
nightmares about like being in a new school building. And it's really funny because in my nightmare, it's always like some approximation of the middle school building that I attended, where I'm like having a nightmare because I don't know where my locker is and I'm late to class. It's so funny. It always takes place in that middle school building.
Yeah, I'm and maybe this data is just anecdotal and doesn't, I don't know. Maybe it doesn't exist in the way that I'm curious if it does, but I just wonder what that does to also performance achievement. You know what I mean? Like, because I can remember the stress of going to a new school and starting a new grade and getting a new teacher, and maybe there's something
new
to be
friends
said.
too, new
and like
groups of students.
Yeah, like I knew going into 5th grade it was going to be really different because I was losing. No, I wasn't losing. That's a way of young me talking about it, but. That was when our elementaries combined.
Yeah.
Here. I grew up in a district that we had 2 elementaries and they were on one side of the district and the other.
We had 3 and they were very students were very competitive. We were like, I remember in 5th grade when our grades combined being like, well, I'm a Stormont kid and that kid's not a Stormont kid. Right. I'm only friends with the Stormont kid. The Stormont was the elementary school.
Yeah.
And I'm like, why do we care about, like, why is this the marker? The social hierarchy is currently being broken down according to which elementary school we attended.
And it was really just about like location, right? Geographically speaking, that's all it ever amounted to. It just so happened that we were on this side and they were on that side.
Truly, it was just like where your address is.
Right.
And I'm just like, why did we think that mattered? But it was a very big deal.
I remember going to 5th grade and that being a huge change. It was a new building. It was new people. We knew students. Middle school was another big jump. So I'm just curious to see what that shows us. When we talk about high school students, right? I teach 10th graders. For the first 9 weeks, I'm teaching 9th graders. They're not 10th graders yet. Yeah. I'm still growing. I would have to assume
9.75 graders.
Yeah, they're like almost 10th graders, but they're not quite. They might be on paper, but they're still baby freshmen. I wonder how that, you know what I mean, translates. That's all. I'm just curious.
5th grade, I remember feeling, it's like the first time I felt kind of small and invisible in a school setting. And a lot of that just was because there were so many more students.
Yeah.
So
much
when you would
pool.
walk down the halls in between classes, you'd get swallowed into this river of kids. And that was never the case because in the elementary school, the grades were segmented by floor.
Yeah.
And there were just fewer people around at any given time.
Well, and you had like class changes at a certain time when other classes weren't moving.
You weren't scheduling, you weren't piling up tons and tons of kids all at once in the halls, so you just started to feel more like you were kind of a speck in the ocean. And that's another part of middle school where I was just like, this is kind of overwhelming. There's like a lot going on here and I'm not following all of these changes.
I'm just curious what the data shows, and that's kind of what these things that you've been talking about are all asking too. But I'm just curious what that process is.
I want to know
like.
how deer in the headlights the kids are when they get there. Like that's what I want to hear about. And I think it would be difficult to be a teacher in that year because you have to focus so much time and energy on dealing with all of these social emotional changes that your students are going through.
Like lunch is a different time. You might not have recess anymore. I don't know. I'm just curious. So if you're I'm going to call you a jump teacher because I don't know what that other term would be. If you are a teacher who teaches after a gap, maybe into a new building or something like that, maybe write us in. Just let us know what your experience is like and how much of your time is spent reestablishing a schedule or, you know what I mean?
Trust
just kind of
with your students. Yeah.
Gosh, if you're already dealing with all of the changes of your body going into middle school, which most people are experiencing some form of puberty at that, at whatever stage they're in.
Yep.
And then on top of that, maybe you're combined with, a much larger group than you had been. I can see how middle school could be overwhelming. Like I said, I feel so fortunate that my middle school experience was a good one. And like I said, I think a lot of it was because I had my dad for a couple of those years. And also being a teacher's kid just totally changes the landscape. That makes my life so much different from others because it's truly like Big Brother. It's just my middle school assistant principal was one of the Holden families or principal, you know what I mean? And then one of my other administrators was one of my dad's former administrators and friends. So like very different experience for me. And I recognize that.
You had a built-in support group.
I did. I had people everywhere I went. The other thing that I wanted to say that I thought was interesting about my jump to high school, which you probably experienced in some way, was that going from middle school to high school, I had kind of a grace period because we had marching band in the summer. And that actually was really helpful for me because I already knew 120 people going into high school. Yeah. And I think that, if I was just to talk about what I see from freshmen, the freshmen who are coming in with some kind of activity, sport, whatever, volleyball, football, orchestra, whatever, I think that really kind of helps mind the gap, if you will.
No, I totally, that's what I was talking about.
That was crucial.
Yeah, that's why I was talking about the music program so much and finding friends in those groups is because I had continuity in music groups.
Yeah. Did that make becoming a freshman easier for you?
Yeah,
you think?
I mean, that was just when I got to high school, that was my friend group. And those are the people who stayed my friends because I was, I tried out for a string group. I was in a string group and I was in that for all 4 years of high school. Did you do that
in the summer before in freshman year?
I believe so.
Yeah. So you kind of had some knowledge of the who's who.
I believe so. Yeah. So that's because I was in string sounds all 4 years. So that must have. So I went to the camp in the summer before freshman year. So having continuity there, like I said, all those orchestra kids were my friends all throughout high school. So
did that feel like an easier jump for you than the middle school?
Yeah.
Middle school to high?
For sure.
Was easier for you?
For sure.
I think so too.
Because the jump from middle school to high school, like the structure of the school day doesn't feel all that remarkably different.
No.
You still have, you have to go
classes.
from class to class. You still have to, but it's basically the same. It functions the same way. So that wasn't all that disruptive. And then, like I said, it had taken me 4 grueling years of middle school to find a friend group, and a lot of them were musicians.
So that helped.
But then I had a automatic friend group when I got to high school. And so, yeah, that transition was much smoother.
I think that is a benefit for a lot of our freshmen when they're involved in something in the fall.
Well, that's kind of the thing, is that like we don't silo kids into after school activity buckets. So we don't silo kids into like, well, they're the sports kids or they're the music kids, or we don't do that to elementary school students. We start to do that to middle school students. Yeah. And before you have that figured out, before you have figured out where your niche is in your friend group, if you're the sporty kid or the nerdy kid or the the musician kid or the theater kid or whatever it is, before you figure that out, it's just a wide open ocean, and you have very little to help you navigate it.
Yeah, because I remember, for me in elementary school, I can remember driving up to the school, I don't know, a couple weeks before school started, and on the window would be posted the class list. And that was how you found out who was going to be in your class with you. And I remember just being devastated that some of my friends had not been placed in the same 4th grade class as me. Oh, yeah,
same.
And I think that's kind of what's funny about elementary school is that I think in my school, there were like 3 4th grade teachers. So a third of you were going each way, basically. And I just remember my parents like consoling me in the car to be like,
oh yeah, that was always a big deal.
They're not going to be in my class.
Your friends are in your class.
And they've been in my class in 2nd grade.
Yeah.
And it felt like they were another world away, but really they were just like across the hall.
It's traumatizing. And honestly,
I think that mixing those grades is what's best for everyone, certainly. Like I don't know if it would have been as good for me to have been learning in the same set of kids at all 4 years.
I don't think so either.
First through fourth or something.
What I'm saying is that I think schools can do a better job of scaffolding that change so that kids aren't so caught out in the blue. Like
that's true.
Because again, like I'm saying, it's a radical shift, and most of it's social emotional, and it's like it's the time when kids become freaking depressed about social and like body image and all of this stuff. And again, I'm just reliving my own middle school trauma, but all I'm saying is we pay more attention to probably like the cognitive and academic impacts of this jump, but like the social emotional ones, I don't think get enough attention, and I think that that's why so many students struggle so much. And I think we need to kind of figure out a way to equip students to better navigate that stuff rather than just throwing them in the deep end and be like, well, you're not with your friends anymore. Good luck.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. All right. Are we ready to move on?
Can I just say one thing?
Yes, please.
If you are one of those teachers, if you're a middle school teacher, just write into us, hello@16to1.com. We would love to hear about your experience as a middle school teacher. I have only ever done a little bit of Title I support at a middle school, so I don't consider myself an expert of these young people. So if you would like to write in and tell us about your experience and kind of what the craziness is like for you, we would love to share it with our listeners. Or if you're a certified help and can support Chelsea during this very trying time of revisiting her middle school years, we would welcome that. We'll even pay a copay. But no, I would like to hear from some of these educators, just because this is outside of my wheelhouse, certainly.
Yep.
I mean, I'm getting a different type of puberty in high school, so you know. Anyways, anything else?
No, I think that's about it.
Okay.
I've said my piece. I'm obviously still scarred.
The research is not very clear. I mean, it's not just going one way for sure. So I think that's
about whether we should have K-8 or separate. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I was expecting more definitive.
Well, like I said, it seems to be more about
all the other factors.
It seems more about a holistic approach to education that treats these issues with some intention. You know, the New York State School Board's article was suggesting it's really kind of about how you equip your teachers to best support students and how you structure the day so that students don't feel kind of untethered in this new wide open ocean of middle school. Yeah. So,
okay.
We're going to move on to fill in the blank. Would you like to do last episode's question? Okay. Before that, we do want to have a note. We are not going to have the answer to this episode's question in the next episode. We skipped our fill in the blank with Dr. Shorter. So you're going to have to wait for a couple episodes for the answer for this one. But go ahead and do last episode's question. Again, this is fill in the blank. And if you know the answer to this week's question, go ahead and write into us. Like Kate just mentioned, it's hello@16to1.com. We would love to hear from you, and take it away.
Okay. Last episode's question was, as of summer 2020, blank percentage of U.S. teachers reported conducting at least some of their teaching online from home. That was from Ed Week. And the answer was 93% of U.S. teachers during 2020.
That's
the 2019-2020
extraordinary when you,
that
all
was
things considered.
That was the COVID
The
year.
COVID year, yeah.
So, and what's your question for this episode?
This episode's question. In the early 1900s, there was support for marking more of a transition from elementary to secondary education. In 1909, this school in Columbus, Ohio, just down the street from us, was the first school to be designed as a separate junior high school, incorporating what was then the last 2 years of elementary school with the first years of high school. What is the name of that school? Mm-hmm. All right. Ready to talk about what we learned? What did you learn in the last?
First?
Yeah, go ahead. Go for it.
So as we were flying home, or attempting to fly home, we got into a plane traffic jam.
We did.
In Bozeman, Montana, which basically means there's too much traffic.
Yes.
Leaving and coming. Mm-hmm. And we literally had to sit and wait for like 20 minutes.
It was like a ground traffic hold, I think you called it. Something like that.
And so I don't think I've ever been in a plane traffic jam before. That wasn't on my list for travel woes. But we really were in a plane traffic jam. Mm-hmm. And Chelsea and I had noticed when we were boarding, they were like way more eager to like get us to where we needed to be.
They were hurrying people. They kept yelling like, please sit down. Like, hurry up and get out of the aisle. Like, they were being nice about it, but they were like, come on, people.
Yeah. Do you need help?
Stop. Let's go.
Need help? Which I was fine with, because sometimes the behavior of people on airplanes is what I would have to assume it is like to watch, if you're an alien watching a human.
It's like a petri dish of humanity. Yeah, for sure.
It is just the wildest experience. Mm-hmm. There is no humanity like that on an airplane. It is just, it's a grab bag.
It's so anyways, strange experience.
We got stuck in a plane traffic jam. I just don't like people on airplanes. That's my whole story.
I just don't like people.
Well, and like last thing about flying, when we got into Columbus, they didn't have the jetway ready to like attach to our plane, right? Because we got in kind of late. And they like made an announcement that was like, okay, we're going to sit here and wait till they tell us what gate. People standing. A little bit later, like 5 minutes later, it wasn't like a quick thing, I didn't think. Like 5 minutes later, okay, well, we're at the gate, but the jetway isn't attached, so just take a seat. Every dude around us stands up. Mm-hmm. I'm like, you're all one to clap, too. You're probably those people who clap when we land. They weren't. But it was just remarkable how little these people are aware of, like... And you and I are just sitting there still watching whatever, reading, chilling, because we're like, what are you going to do?
Yeah.
But it's just... If you're flying, man, you're just... It's a whole other world out there.
That's true.
And on our way out, Chelsea nearly had made a very close friend who was almost asleep on your shoulder multiple times. Which was
our row mate was tipping over into my space.
But we've had a few great experiences on United, so I'll be a United stan until I have a reason not to be.
Okay.
Plane traffic jams, you know?
Plane traffic jams.
That was it.
All right.
All right, your turn.
I've just been reading and learning about this Silicon Valley Bank debacle, I suppose you could say. So it's this Silicon Valley Bank this past week, I think it was. We were kind of out of loop because we were, again, resting and trying to be a bit disconnected. But so there's basically a run on Silicon Valley Bank, which is this bank that a ton of startups use. Like I think thousands of startups use this bank. And basically what happened was because of inflation, the value of things like long-term bonds and mortgage-backed securities that the bank purchased during this period of hyperactivity that happened kind of like not, previous to COVID, I guess I would say like 2018, 2019, that it kind of in that range, there was like what I think was just way too much heat, especially in the startup and tech zone. There was just too much venture capital money flying around and everyone was way overconfident about like the stock market and all of these things. Anyway, we basically set ourselves up for this failure that we're experiencing now, but because of inflation, because of some of these assets depreciating, and the other thing is that now we've got a bunch of startups who are less flush now than they want to be, and they're starting to need to pull money out of their accounts, which means that the bank needed way more liquidity than it had to hand out. And so a couple of these big players started to notice this. And then there's like, oh, you better pull your money out of Silicon Valley Bank now. Before, you can't anymore because they only insure up to $250,000. And some of these companies, I think Roku had something like, it was hundreds of millions. Like Roku has hundreds of millions of dollars in this bank, like 300 or 400 million, something like that in this bank. And they're only insured up to 250,000. So anyway, that's what I learned about. We're not sure. I think I read this was the second largest bank failure in U.S. history.
Really?
So there are people very concerned right now as to whether or not this is going to set off a chain reaction among
Do you know who
other
that was
banks.
Behind?
I can't. Probably one of the ones in the 2008 crisis, but I couldn't tell you which.
No, that's fine. I was just...
There are so many of them. I couldn't say.
Yeah, I know. How would we start? Let me name the ways.
I think that's what I read. It was the second largest, but
I mean, not cool, but interesting.
Yeah, very very uncool because now a lot of companies can't make payroll. So that
not cool.
While they try to get their money back. Interesting times ahead. We're not sure if it's going to spread to other areas of the tech industry or financial sectors. We're just kind of not sure yet what this means, but mostly it means that a lot of people are saying that it just kind of indicates that there was simply too much heat in the tech industry in years prior, and now we're kind of seeing the effects of all of that wild amount of capital flying around willy-nilly. We're now no longer in that period, and so we're somewhat reaping what we sowed. But anyway, that's what I learned. I learned about that.
So much to unpack. All right, I think that's it.
Yep. I think it's good. Take care of yourselves. If you had a spring break or have one, enjoy it. And we will talk to you again soon. We'll talk to you in 2 weeks.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for supporting 16 to 1.
We're trying to grow our audience, so please check us out at 16to1.com, all spelled out, and tell your friends about the show.
On our website, you can find links to follow us on social media, an archive of all our old episodes, and a contact form where you can get in touch.
Thanks again for listening, and we'll catch you next show. Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. You're going to be just having to hear the cat in the background because she hasn't seen us in a week. And
she missed us.
Letting us know. Can you come up here with your... No, too much. Ow!
Wow, she just chomped your hand real hard. I saw that. She just took a big old bite.
I wasn't even ready. I wasn't even looking at you. Don't flick your tail at me.